Thank you everyone for joining us for this webcast on IoT using APIs to program disparate IoT devices. A very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you. I'm joined here with John Calagaz, CTO of CentraLite. We'll do introductions in just a minute. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. After this webinar, you can access the recording on our YouTube channel. You can also access the slides on our SlideShare channel. And if you have additional questions for us, you can visit the Apigee community at community.apigee.com and post your questions there. And by the way, these channels have the recordings and slides from all our previous webinars as well. So with that, my name is Abhi Rele. I am a product here at Apigee focusing on all things IoT. It's my pleasure to be joined by John Calagaz from CentraLite. John, do you want to give us a quick introduction?
Sure, Abhi. I appreciate the opportunity to be on this webcast. Like Abhi said, my name is John Calagaz. I'm the CTO at CentraLite Systems. We manufacture and design a whole bunch of different types of devices, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I appreciate being here.
Awesome. And we're excited to have you here. This is, I believe, your first webcast with Apigee.
That's correct.
Awesome. So we have a very exciting agenda for the webcast today. IoT is very hot today. There's a lot of hype around IoT. And yet when developers want to work with IoT, it can be very daunting, but it doesn't have to be. So what we thought we would focus our time today is just give you a better picture of the challenges that you would face if you were a software developer and had to work with devices. Especially when you have multiple devices you want to work with, what are the challenges in working with them, in programming them, in accessing data from them, as well as getting them to interoperate. So we wanted to draw out the picture as is today. We'll then switch and talk about how REST APIs can make this easy, how REST APIs can help you program multiple devices and then give you access to sensor and actuator data. Once we set that, then we'll talk about a few examples of how you can use the data that you have access to from these devices and generate real business value. One of the things you'll notice throughout this webcast is we are using real examples. We're going to show you a real hands-on demo of a REST API and how it makes life easy for developers. So this is very much a hands-on session. You'll walk away with some real insights from real-world examples that we are bringing to bear. We'll do questions at the end, but don't wait for asking us questions till the end. You can start posting your questions through the webinar tool, and we'll pick those up at the end of the webinar. So with that, why don't we get started? So John, this is the first time that CentraLite and yourself are both joining an Apigee webcast. So tell us a little bit more about CentraLite.
Well, CentraLite's a company primarily known for designing and manufacturing quality control and sensing devices. We've been doing it now for over 18 years, so we're not new to the game. Originally, we were making hardwired lighting control products for very large and expensive homes, but over the last 5 or 6 years, we've been able to bring home automation that's more a retrofittable solution to the masses. And you can see through our partner list here where all these devices are going. Now, not a lot of them will say CentraLite, but a lot of the underlying products that these companies are selling or representing are CentraLite devices.
That's awesome. So you guys are really the experts in embedded devices, and you've been in the IoT space before IoT became hot.
That's correct. We've staffed ourselves with a lot of quality engineers and quality sales guys here so that we're able to take IoT, like we said earlier, to the mass market, because that's really what's going to make IoT successful. It's not going to be the large high-end homes of the past years. It really needs to get into the mass market, and we're trying our best to do it so that not only is it easy to use, but it's also affordable, which has in the past not been the case.
Sure. So that's a great segue for us to start talking about challenges that developers will face today when they have to work with devices, as well as when you have multiple devices, whether it's a thermostat, a light bulb, a car, a bulldozer, what have you, from getting these devices to interoperate. So you have a lot of experience in this space. So why don't we start with, let's just take a very simple scenario. Let's say you have two devices. This could be a thermostat and a light bulb. Paint the picture for us around, if I was a software developer and I had to work with these devices, what would my experience be? What are some of the challenges that I would face? What would I need to know to be able to work with these devices?
Sure. So the next couple of slides we'll go through this, and one of the first things we want to do is if device A needs to talk directly to device B, the first thing that we're going to look at is what is that physical layer. And so if you go to the next slide here, device A could be sub-gigahertz, it could be 900 megahertz, 2.4 power line carrier, or some proprietary method. And so device A, the first thing you really need to understand is how does it communicate? And once you understand the physical aspect to it, then the next slide shows, the protocol. You have to understand all these different protocols to understand, how it's actually going to communicate. So you have examples like 3G or 4G, in-ocean, Z-Wave. We're big Zigbee guys here. Wi-Fi, the new Thread initiative. And then you have some of the power line stuff, X10, UPB, and then you also have all the proprietary stuff. So once you understand once you understand the actual protocol, now you have to go a step further. And when you go that next step, then you have what's called profiles. And profiles are actually the standards built on top of the protocol. So now, let's say that I have all of this down there, and I figure out that, let's say that I want to do Zigbee, and now I need to go and understand which profiles Zigbee has built into it. And, from Zigbee, you even have a lot more options than you would think. You have the home automation profile, you have the building automation profile, you have Light Link, Smart Energy, now you have Smart Energy 2, and now you're talking about Zigbee 3.0. There's just a lot of different, profiles built into one protocol.
So John,
and that's challenging for the, sure.
No, sorry to interrupt you. So if I'm a software developer,
Sure.
First of all, I have to understand this plethora of protocols, and that list seems to be growing, and now you also have different standards. But even within a protocol, it goes fairly deep. So if I'm a software developer, I really need to understand the intricacies of the device as well as of the protocol itself that the device speaks.
That's definitely correct.
Okay. That's pretty daunting.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons that we're taking care of this for you guys, because it is daunting and it's very difficult to find embedded programmers that not only have experience in, even one of these, let alone, 10 different ones.
Okay. So we've come to profiles, but it doesn't quite end there, right? You still need to go down one more level at least.
Correct, and that's the next slide here. The profiles within home automation, there's actually 3 different profiles. So if you started, 6 years ago, you were working under the HA 1.1 profile. Recently, a couple years ago, it changed to 1.2. And 1.1 and 1.2 are very hard to make compatible with each other. So Zigbee 3.0 is coming out, and 3.0 is supposed to take all these profiles away and make it easy and nice for developers to be able to say Zigbee is Zigbee and not worry about all the profiles. But that hasn't been launched yet, but people are working very hard to, at the embedded level, try to make Zigbee 3.0 at least one less step that the developers have to do. So we're looking closely at Zigbee 3.0 as well.
Okay. So is that it, or do you need to also think about other considerations when you want one of these devices to talk to another?
That's not it. You actually have one more layer now. Now you have to look at what the device types within that profile are. So, you have the logical examples like the on-off switch, level control, the dimmable light, the shade, the thermostat, and then you also have some proprietary devices that you might not know about. And so when you're trying to communicate from device A to device B, which was the original problem, now you have to not only get down to the protocol level and the profile level, you have to also understand if the 2 different device types can logically talk to each other. So For example, a on-off switch can logically talk to a light. And so that's a pretty easy transition to get the light switch to talk to a light. However, a lot of people want to do some things that aren't necessarily logical at the device type level, but it makes logic, it makes sense, at the real world level. So an example of that is, let's say that you have a motion sensor that is Zigbee, and you have a sprinkler controller that is Zigbee. Well, you wouldn't really think the motion sensor would talk to the sprinkler, but if you have a motion sensor at your front door, typically people have front door sensors to turn on a camera or to let people see who's at the front door when they knock. Well, what if that motion sensor could talk directly to that sprinkler if the sprinkler was on? So if somebody is walking up, to your front door and the sprinklers are on, you can go ahead and shut them off. That's a not logical, connection between those two devices, but it's a very doable connection. And so, in the devices themselves, you're not really able to make that connection, so you need a different layer.
So that's a pretty fascinating use case. So, and so far we've used home automation as one example, and we've gone through so many layers, but let's say you want to go across different profiles. So if I'm again a developer, I need to understand this level of detail for each profile. And we're just talking one protocol here, we're just talking Zigbee. If you're looking at other protocols, then you need to understand the depth there as well.
Definitely.
Okay. So if you have these two devices, and let's say we've gone down the path and they both talk the same, they have the same profile and they're on the same version. Okay, now at least we're talking. If I can riff on that, but even then it's not that simple, right? Like you have these two devices that talk to each other. There are some other considerations that you also need to think about in terms of timing and how fast you can get these devices to work together that come into play.
Correct. Yeah. Even if you have device A and device B all running HA 1.2, and there's a logical connection between the two, in a lab environment, yes, you can get device A to communicate with device B. But in the real world scenario, you have to worry about the platform that is actually running devices A and device B. A lot of these systems, are not just point solutions. They have a central gateway running the entire system. Therefore, not only does device A and device B have to communicate with each other, they also have to be able to communicate with the platform. And once you bring a platform involved to the scenario, then you have issues like device type support. You might have one platform that supports, dimmable switches, and another platform that might not yet support dimmable switches. So you have to make sure that device A and device B are actually supported on the platform you want them to join.
Sure.
And once they're supported, then you have to go through certifications for the platforms, which are all, good things to do. It just takes time. And so once you go through the certifications, then you can get on the platform's whitelist, or if you're not lucky, you might get on the platform's blacklist. And so therefore, it's still not as easy as device A directly communicating to device B. There's a lot of external scenarios and sources that you also have to worry about.
Right. So this is kind of the world that you are living in, and as you started looking at IoT and you started looking at the potential that IoT could have, you had what I've heard you describe many times as a platform awakening moment, and this is what led you to eventually start working with Apigee here. Tell us a little bit about your platform awakening story. That's a pretty interesting story.
Sure, yeah. So here at CentraLite, we actually created a pretty slick device that fits over the top of the standard light switch. And the reason we created it is because we've seen the connected bulbs come out, and when the connected bulbs first came out, everybody here at CentraLite said, that's a great idea. However, when somebody's walking out of the room and they flip the light switch off, you can no longer communicate to those. So the connected light bulbs are great, but they're only great when they have power supplied to them. So you might walk out of the room, flip the switch, and then later on somebody else comes in and wants to communicate with the devices on their iPhone, and they're not able to do it, but it's because there's no power to the actual light. So what we did is we created a switch that goes on top of the actual light, and it keeps it in the physical on position. We don't have any motors in there moving the light switch up and down, but what we do have is we have a Zigbee chip and a battery in there. And so the Zigbee chip can actually communicate to the light itself, and so when somebody's walking out of the room, they can hit the down button and it'll turn the light off, or when they're walking into the room, you can hit the top button and it'll turn the light on. But it always keeps the line voltage there so that anybody that wants to can control the light. So we've created this device, but now we have this whole platform issue that the majority of the platforms we're working with right now don't yet support that device. And we've had it for over a year now. And so I was at a conference one day, and I had this booth I saw where this person comes up to me and asks me to hit the button. And I said, okay, well, I'll hit the button. And when I hit the button, a light turned on. And so that got me curious, and so I looked under the table, and sure enough, it was one of our devices that the guy was turning on with the button, and also, sure enough, it was on one of the platforms that we are supported on. But the concept of that button is not supported on the system yet. So it got me thinking, okay, well, how are they doing this? And when I asked the guy, it's a cloud-to-cloud connection. And so instead of wasting a year of trying to get it on the platform, this guy just did a cloud-to-cloud connection via an API, and he was able to do it very quickly. So that got me thinking, like Abhi said, why not get our devices to where they're available via an API that everybody knows how to work with? And so with that, we got with Apigee, and instead of a 5 to 24 month cycle with a device that was no longer or was not able to be supported on a platform, with APIs, you basically can get that device supported as fast as you can, as long as both platforms support the API, which typically they do.
Absolutely, and that's a great story because it really shows how you can hide all the complexity around understanding the details of these devices and make them work in a more simple manner. And you've actually taken that a step ahead. Your whole platform awakening experience really led you to believe that you could use REST APIs to program devices, especially multiple devices, and then get access to their sensor and actuator data. So this is probably a good segue to start talking about how the REST APIs can help. We've set the stage on that they can help, but let's look at how they can help. And rather than have a more academic conversation, we thought we'd just look at a live example using some of the work that CentraLite has done to see how easy it can be for a software developer to work with these devices. And hopefully what you'll realize is that contrary to what you've seen so far about understanding the different devices and the protocols and their versions and the compatibility, with the REST API, it's like any other API that you're used to programming with. So it just makes IoT a lot more accessible and a lot easier, and you can program devices and be a part of IoT. So John, you've actually you just launched something on Tuesday of this week. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So as the slide shows, we actually launched a platform called Gilia. And Gilia makes it easier for software developers to control and access devices. Not only our devices, but any devices that support all the different protocols and standards you saw in the previous slides. So what we wanted to do is there's a very large community in the open source hardware and software. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to make a couple of add-on boards to support this community. So CentraLite this week, we launched a Kickstarter campaign, and if you go to gilia.io, it'll take you to the Kickstarter campaign. And we took the Raspberry Pi and the BeagleBone Black, which seem to be very popular with the makers, and we put all of these different radios and different sensors and buttons and LEDs and everything on just one cape. So with this system, you're able to put one of our capes on the BeagleBone Black or on the Raspberry Pi, plug it in to the network, and it will access the Gilia cloud, and then from there you can register that gateway or hub inside of our developer portal. And now with simple APIs, you can get Zigbee devices on board, you can get Z-Wave devices, you can have Wi-Fi, you can have Bluetooth devices, and you as the developer, the standard application developer, not the embedded developer, can take this system and have, your own home, or have, if you work for an enterprise company, you can take it to your boss and say, hey, look, I now can put a thermostat in every single one of our fast food chains, and with this framework, I'm able to build this into our existing system. And so we're not, using somebody else's platform. It's our platform. It's the company that you're working for. It's their platform utilizing the Gilia framework, and it's been abstracted out to where the standard developer can access it.
That's awesome. So for the folks on the phone, if you go to gilia.io, you can back it. So why don't we just use that? I know you're not yet, your campaign just launched, so you're not yet shipping the devices. That's going to happen later. But why don't we give people a sneak peek of how Gilia makes it easy for developers to program these devices? And I think the contrast between what Gilia does and what we saw with on the hardware side, I think will become pretty apparent. So why don't we just step through? We'll do a quick demo and show you guys how easy it is with Gilia. And by the way, this is where Apigee and CentraLite have been working very closely. So what you're seeing here is using Apigee technology, namely Apigee Link as well as Apigee Edge. So let's look at more on the Apigee Link side, and let me share my screen. So John, walk us through how let's walk through the Gilia API and how it helps developers get access to program devices. And let's just show them how easy it is.
Sure. So this is the developer portal. And with the Getting Started tab, basically there's 5 or so steps that can quickly get you communicating to your devices. So, with this being more of the enterprise level system, but we're bringing it also just to the standard developers, we wanted to keep that security involved. So every communication we have is always secure, and it's always based on some form of authentication, and this is going to be an authentication token. So just as easy to get an authentication token is to select the app that you're wanting to use, and you can see we pre-populate your key and your secret, which is given to us from Apigee Edge. And you're able to grab the token. You're also able to see the curl command that is needed to make this function call. And it's a very simple call. So if you hit get token now, what it'll do is it'll come back and you can see the data response. We went ahead and parsed it out for you, but if you really are interested, which a lot of you guys are, into seeing the raw response, we also can show you the raw response for the API. And then there it is. And so once you have this authentication access token, now you're able to go communicate with all of your different devices. So the servers, if you go to the next step, the servers are our actual gateways, our hubs. And so with the Kickstarter campaign, this very easily could be the BeagleBone Black or the Raspberry Pi. And so you can see on this, it comes back with 3 different servers. These are actual real servers running on the BeagleBone Black in one of our developers' office.
And the same thing again.
So now you can see. Yeah.
No, sorry, go ahead. I was just going to point out it's really easy from a developer standpoint. The information is nicely formatted, but if you want to look at the API response, it's available as well. And this is built on Apigee Link, so it uses the same Hypermedia API. If any of you on the phone have used Zeta.js, our open source project, you'll be very familiar with this. So you see links to all the APIs. You see the href commands here. So API response includes that. Sorry, John, go ahead.
No, it's great. So the list of servers, the next thing you can do is you can get per server all the devices. So if you now go into the list servers box, you can select, whichever server you wanted to. And now if you list the devices, it's going out to that gateway and coming back with all the different devices. And as you can see here, there's a couple thermostats, some relays, some dimmers. What you're not seeing is you're not seeing the word Zigbee, or you're not seeing the word Z-Wave or Wi-Fi. It's because you don't care whether it's Zigbee or Z-Wave. All that you care is that it's a thermostat or some type of device.
That I think is
you can also, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead, John. There's a lag here. Go ahead. Finish your thought and then I'll add.
No, I was just going to say that, just like all the other APIs, these are all very simple RESTful APIs where we can show you as little as you want or as much as you want.
Yeah. The nice thing here is a thermostat is a thermostat, a light bulb is a light bulb. We really are masking all the underlying complexity that we just walked through. And whether you want here you have a nice formatted response, but you also have the API response. So for all the developers on the phone, you can see a list of all the entities on the server. So for example, you can see the same thermostat, you can see all the properties. So just by reading this API response, you can get a very good idea of all the different properties that the device has. You get a link to the API for that device. So it's just a very easy way to interact with these devices. So John, there is one more. Okay, so we've seen a device, but what if I want to look at that device in more detail and take actions on it?
Great, so if you go down and you want to actually see the device details, you can click on the number 4 there, and you can say, okay, I already know which server I'm communicating with or which gateway. Now, I want to communicate with the thermostat, so I just quickly connect thermostat, and we do all the hard work for the device ID and send the command, and now you get the data back that you care about. And so you can see here in the thermostat, it's the current temperature, the heating, cooling set point, the modes, everything that you're concerned about. We come back in very generalized format, and so you're able to now also see this thermostat has actions. And so that's where Abhi was talking about the Hypermedia API is you can ask this thermostat what can it do. And so in the actions portion, you can see that you can change the heating set point, you can change the cooling set point, you can change the mode. And so now with these functions that the thermostat told you about, you can come into the next step and you can actually call those actions.
Yeah.
So when you go down to the
Sure. One thing I did want to point out, John, was all these responses. If you look at changing the state of the thermostat, for example, we saw that you could change the heating set point. It's just an HTTP post, and the API response has all the information you need. So you could try the same URL if you use Postman or any of these tools, and change the setting, which is again very much in line with what a software developer is used to when they worked with APIs.
That's correct.
So let's look at the last one. Let's actually change the temperature on this thermostat. All right, so what do you want to change, John? Should we lower the temperature a little bit?
Sure.
Let's do 68. Let's just make it comfortable. All right, so there we go. So now these are mock devices, but it would be the same action if this was actually connected to a real device, and that would have changed the setting on the thermostat that would be on your wall.
That's correct. With the Gilia sandbox, which is what this is running, we don't necessarily require you to have hardware devices because it really doesn't matter. Once you get a hardware device that is a standard Zigbee or Z-Wave, it's not going to look any different to you as the developer than what these mock devices look like.
Right. And in this case, we looked at a thermostat which has an actuator, but if we had looked at, let's say, one of these doors, maybe a dimmer, Now in this case, the dimmer also has some actions, but if you had, let's say, a device that did not have an actuator, like a door sensor or a motion sensor, then there is obviously no action you can take. So there is no post command you can do on that API. So it's again it's modeled in line with the real world. So the device works the way you would expect the device to work, and is modeled in the same way in the software as well.
That's correct.
Yeah. So hopefully, for everyone on the anything else you want to point out here, John?
No, I think we went through it. One thing that we do is we sort of walk you through this getting started in 5 different steps, but you don't have to make all those 5 steps in order to do this. You could go directly to the device details as long as you know the different gateways you want to connect to, and just go directly to that. And so you're able to really quickly, change the set point of a thermostat.
Cool. This is really easy. So for I haven't done software development in a while, but looking back at my developer days, this is something I can deal with. I don't really need to understand anything about those devices. All right. So from a developer standpoint, okay, you now have a way to work with devices, to program them, and the same API will give you access to the data streams from the devices. Let's also talk a little bit about what can developers do with this data. How do you transform this data into real business value? Because at the end of the day, it's great to program these devices, but if you can't access that data and can't translate that into some sort of action, it really doesn't solve a problem. So we wanted to give you a very simple framework to think about this, and this is something that John, I've heard you talk a lot about as well, and we'll see that in examples. But rather than succumb to the hype of IoT, just start with a real business problem that your customers have. So for the folks on the phone, if you're working for a large company and you're interested in IoT, think about the problems that your customers have. Think about how data from these devices can help solve that problem. Then figure out what analysis you need, and then devise a solution. And you'll see through some of the examples that you don't need fancy analytics for all these solutions. Just thinking about it from a problem standpoint and working backwards will make sure that the IoT solution you build actually has legs and has value. So John, I know you guys work a lot with hotels, with hospitality. Help us understand, how do you approach solving using IoT to solve problems for a hotel? And I know there are multiple audiences that are involved in hospitality. And again, everyone on the phone has stayed at a hotel, so these use cases would be very easy to relate to.
Sure. So we've been doing hospitality energy management solutions for over 5 years now, and it used to be a proprietary system with a thick client running on a machine at the front desk in the manager's office and housekeeping, and it just really was a nightmare to manage. And every single time we went to sell a hotel, every hotel wanted something different. So with the new Gilia platform, and also the back end being the Apigee Edge and Link, we're able to now offer up an API so that all of the existing apps and existing infrastructure that the hotels already have, instead of us writing something for them, they can now incorporate our APIs to their systems. So, we have, for the hotel side, we have the manager who might want to see, the real-time occupancy of a hotel. So all that they see right now is they really just see the rented, unrented state. So you can be in a hotel in Vegas, and sure, it might be 95% rented, but at noon, when everybody's at conferences, it might only be 25% occupied. So we're able, with our sensors and data collection tools, we're able to grab this occupancy data and supply it back to the hoteliers so they can make the informed solution of what to do to consume less energy, or to change where staffing needs need to be increased or decreased. One example is, some of the larger hotels will shut down 2 or 3 elevators during the middle of the day if occupancy levels are below a certain percentage. They're also able to really quickly see their hotel in a snapshot. And it's every hotel is different. So one hotel might want to see the kilowatt usage. One hotel might not care about the kilowatt usage. They want to see the number of thermostats running in cool mode. Well, with the APIs, they're able to do what they need to do, not what we would present them in our existing solution we have right now.
So you're really starting with, if you look at it from a hotel manager standpoint, how do you help them reduce their energy usage and energy costs? And then you've sort of worked it backwards in terms of looking at occupancy in rooms, or usage of elevators, and devise a solution around that. And similarly, on this graphic, you also have rented versus occupied, just giving visibility into which rooms are occupied and have been rented. And again, for everyone who stayed at a hotel, it's very hard to know which rooms are actually rented and occupied, or if somebody is using that room when they should not be. So it creates interesting opportunities and new experiences. But it's not just hotel manager, right? You can also now create specific solutions for different audiences. For example, housekeeping or a hotel guest might need a different view into their hotel experience. They might want more personalization, which you can now deliver.
Right, and that's one of the nice things that we're seeing right now is a lot of the hotels themselves have their own apps. So you're able to book a room from their app, you're able to check in from their app, but once you check in, the app's sort of useless. And so what we're able to do now is allow the hotelier to, inside their app, go ahead and give that user control of his or her hotel room during their stay. So there's no need for fumbling around where the light switches are. There's no need to figure out how to work the thermostat. There's no need to go around when you're trying to go to bed and turn off all the lights. You just hit one button on your app and you're able to turn the entire room off and go to sleep. So it's not only energy management, it's also guest experience and convenience, as well as, like Abhi was talking about, the housekeeping. The housekeeping doesn't need to know all of this data about the lights and the temperature, but one thing they do want is the occupancy. So, we have the ability to not only show them whether or not the room is occupied or not occupied, we're also able to push notifications to them for when the room becomes unoccupied. So they're working more efficiently to clean the room, so they're not constantly knocking and waiting on somebody to answer, and then that guest says, no, can you come back in 30 minutes? They don't have to do that anymore. They can clean the rooms that they know are not occupied, and then when the rooms that they have not yet cleaned become unoccupied, they get a push notification and can shoot down there and clean that room while the guest is out.
So you're really starting with, these are all known problems that hotels have, and you're really making sure that IoT can help them solve these problems. So for each one that you solve, there's a very tangible benefit. And then there's one other aspect, which is from a hotel developer standpoint, when they need to extend the app, like you mentioned, John, they don't need to understand the intricacies of Zigbee and all the devices. They just need to know how to call the API, and they need to know, whether it's a post or a get, and they can program these devices just like they program all their other backend systems. So it's no different from their standpoint. So it really helps the hotel adopt this the connected system as well.
Correct.
Okay, but it's not just hotels, right? You also work with other businesses. I mean, any business can benefit from this approach. Give us a couple more examples of what you've seen even outside hotels.
Sure. So we've actually had the Gilia platform in alpha for a while, and we've gained some great alpha enterprise customers. And it was sort of surprising to see who they are. They're not the standard IoT companies that you would think of. They're companies, like furniture manufacturers, who right now are not necessarily in the game, but they want to be in the game. And so they're working on items that can be integrated into the IoT, but the actual companies themselves are not geared up for that. Their furniture manufacturers are more mechanical. Yeah, they have a lot of great technical people, but they don't have a lot of electrical engineers. They don't have a lot of embedded programmers, but they see the need to get their devices connected. So, to have the ability to have a connected bed in a hotel room, that's one of the best answers for how do I determine occupancy. In a hotel room, typically you're either in the bed, sitting on the bed, or in the desk chair, which is also a piece of furniture. They're able to utilize that to determine occupancy, and so they're able to integrate with hotels as well and other type channels that typically would not be there. We've also had some customers that are more on the service-oriented side, large plumbing companies. You might not think of a plumbing company being an IoT company, but we manufacture and design water sensors. Well, for a plumbing company to be able to sell at low cost or even give away some water sensors, they're able to not only help their customer by notifying their customer that a water leak occurred somewhere, they also get that data. So instantly, when a water leak occurs, that plumbing company can contact the homeowner and say, hey, we noticed something going on. Do you need us to send a truck? And it's an instant lead generator. And plumbing companies, furniture companies, none of them have embedded developers, but they all have application developers. Almost every single type of company right now has an application developer, and they're all used to APIs. So almost overnight, a legacy type company can turn into an IoT company.
Right. And that's so impactful, because that's really what's going to start unlocking value from IoT. And with APIs, it really becomes very easy to start working with these devices. All right, I think we're so far we've seen how hard it can be to program disparate devices, but it really doesn't have to be. We also looked at the Gilia API, and we've seen how hypermedia APIs are well suited for IoT. It can tell you what the actions are. It helps you program devices by just calling the API. And then we also looked at some examples of how you can create value from IoT, whether you're an individual developer or you work for a company. Just start with the business problem and think about how you can solve that problem with IoT. That will help make sure that your solution delivers real value. That was sort of the content we had planned. If you do want to learn more about Gilia, or you want to get some devices for yourself, as John mentioned, go to gilia.io and you can back the Kickstarter campaign. If you want to learn more about the core underlying technology, you can go to the Apigee website, to Apigee link, or to Zeta.js, which is our open source project, and download that and play with it. If you want to see these devices, you want to meet John, learn more on site, visit I Love APIs. Our conference is coming up in October 12th through 14th in San Jose. We have a number of IoT related things happening. There's an IoT showcase. We have workshops, there are sessions, a lot of good stuff around IoT. So if you want to learn more, play with these devices, definitely swing by I Love APIs. And you can use the code webinar15 to get 15% off. Prices increase first of every month. So get 15% off the current price while you can. So with that, let's go to questions. And let me just quickly look at what questions have come through the chat windows. So one of the questions is, does the API work for a single device, or does it work across multiple devices? And the answer is it works across multiple devices. As John mentioned, that is the power of the API, where you can program multiple disparate devices and you can create new digital experiences that previously were not possible. So that's really the power of the API. Second question is, how does device authentication work? John, do you want to talk a little bit about that? You started talking about this at the beginning.
Sure. So the device authentication that we showed on the demo, what you didn't see is you didn't see the apps and the gateways. And what you do is, when you're figuring a gateway, you basically register it. And so now that gateway is yours, and you can communicate with it as much as you want. But you also need a secret and a key. And so inside that Get authentication was a secret and a key that was mapped to that specific app. So you can create an app for a product, and let's say we have just a full-blown product that has all the APIs available. The authentication token will come back and give you access to all of those. But if we have a product for maybe a housekeeping app, you would create an app for the housekeeping, which gives it only access to occupancy data. And so when you use that consumer key and secret, your access token will come back to you, and you will only have access to the occupancy data.
Awesome. Cool. All right, we're running out of time here, so thank you so much, everyone, for your time this morning. Hopefully, you found the webinar useful and insightful. We definitely look forward to having you at I Love APIs, and if you go to Jilia, you want to back the Kickstarter campaign, that would be great too. Have a great day, and if you have more questions, you can always post those to Apigee community or reach us via social media. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John.
Thank you, guys.